And good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. This is great to be here. And thank you for coming to Coffee and Conversations. I hope you have your coffee with you. And I have a very special guest with me this morning, Julie Littlechild. I think a lot of you know who Julie is. Certainly, if you are in the wealth management or asset management business, you know Julie. Julie has been working in the industry and supporting financial advisors for, I'm just going to say, a very long time. Speaking internationally at conferences, and her research continues to be so important for advisors. So I don't want to talk about Julie. I want to bring Julie on. So I think you are live, Julie.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you? Welcome.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm looking forward to this. It's good
Yeah.
to just be able to have a coffee with somebody.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I'm all
And
set too.
awesome. Great. Where's my coffee? There it is. Perfect. Good. So, in the next half hour, Julie, we're just going to have a conversation and people are going to eavesdrop. So I'm just turning on my phone to see who might be joining us. If we can get some likes and hellos, that would be awesome. But Julie, wow, you have spent your career supporting financial advisors and back in the early 2000s, and I know you were already working extensively at that time with advisors. I started coaching advisors primarily in the US, and I would send them to you. I would say, why are you not asking your clients what it is that they want from you? Why are you guessing? So, why don't you start by sharing with us where this passion came from that's kept you doing this work for so long now?
Yeah, it's so funny when you think about where what got you to this place because it's so emergent and it evolves. And I think I'm more passionate now about it, the more evolved it's become than I ever even was. But I mean, the reality is it started because the need to me just seemed patently obvious. I was doing some coaching as well with some advisors that wasn't my place to be, by the way, but but I was working with a number of them. Let's call it consulting, I think. And and every time I would sit down with an advisor or a management team, we'd end up in this place where he said, okay, well, this seems like a good strategy. So what do your clients think? And no, like literally nobody had an answer to that, not in a formal way. It might be, well, we just kind of assume nobody was saying that. And so it just began with, okay, well, we really can't go forward without some meaningful data or insight here. And it started very small. And quite literally over the years, it became the core of what we do to the point where really everything that we do is about inviting the voice of the client in and using that to define the engagement and growth strategies in a business.
Mm-hmm. And I get it. As a trainer, leadership training, sales training,
Mhm.
etc. The questions that are asked at the end of a training session are so bad. Did you like the facilitator? And it's like,
Right.
no. Did you learn something? What do you need? What value did you get? What could be done differently to bring you more value? And I think that's one of the things that I love about the work that you do is that the questions are so meaningful and provide so much information to guide an advisor's business.
Yeah, it's funny because you just hit on a point that I think is part of our issue, and that is too often we think of inviting input after the fact. It's really just about measuring, right?
Right.
So, yeah, I'm the same. We deliver a presentation and then we just hope everybody loves us, and if they don't, it drives us crazy. But it's all about what just happened. Wouldn't it be better before a presentation to say, what are you really concerned about? What are your biggest challenges? What's on your mind? And use that to actually inform the presentation, right? So, I mean, that's a really specific example, but that's effectively one of the big issues that we see because we tend to look at input from clients as falling into two categories. I mean, they're both important, but one is just measurement. How did we do? right? That could
Mhm.
be
Mhm.
satisfaction, net promoter score, all that stuff. It has a role. I'm much more interested in input, right? Like
Yeah.
what's on your mind? What are you worried about? What do you aspire to? And use that to inform the experience that we deliver.
Yeah. No, I think that's critical. I mean, I'm learning already. I want to also put out there, not everybody on this call today is in wealth management.
Hmm.
As much as your business focus is wealth management and supporting financial advisors, if you are a small business owner showing up today, do not tune out because this is also for you. If you don't know what your clients are thinking, what they want, and what you could do more of or different in order to keep them satisfied and keep them coming back, then, please stay on this call.
Yeah, and maybe even more so in some businesses. We've talked to a number of realtors over the years, for
Mhm.
example, and I always find that an interesting one because there's such a long time between transactions, so to speak, right? I'm very loyal to the agent that I work with because she stays in touch with me and understands what's going on in my life on
Yeah.
the off chance I might buy or sell another house at some point, right? And so, yeah, that, and whereas wealth managers, there's a little more contact at least.
Yes. Yeah. Certainly in most cases, you've got an ongoing service
Yep.
as a financial advisor.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So let's talk. I know that you've had different iterations of your business. I absolutely love the name
Absolutely.
of your book and
Yeah.
what you're calling your business.
Yeah.
Absolute engagement, not kind of, sort of, not a little bit. I mean, to me, absolute. It either is or it isn't. It's very binary. So where did that come from, and what does absolute engagement mean?
It's funny you ask because what I have learned is that it means different things to different people, and I think, well, it's kind of like art. Whatever you think is absolutely fine, right? Um, I do think there's two meanings that I started with. One was this notion that we need to aspire to something that is bigger than okay, and
Mhm.
absolute seemed to fit the bill. There's actually a more granular definition of it, though. And, when we started this new company and wrote the book, it was based on some research that we had done with a group of financial professionals. And even more specifically, it kind of came from this idea that as I was looking at some of them, and I'm sure you see this, there was this group of them who were not just successful financially,
Mhm.
but were a little more joyful in how they approached their life and their day and their teams. And it just said something. And I just wanted to understand what was different. So we started to really dig into their business. And where we ended up, and this was really kind of the basis of the book, was that there were three types of engagement at play. It started with personal, so having a clear
Mhm.
personal vision, but that drove client engagement and that drove team engagement. And so the idea of absolute was actually this idea that personal, team, and client engagement all were connected and aligned and working together. And when they
Mhm.
did, it was incredibly powerful.
Yeah. So personal engagement then
Yeah.
is the connection that you have to your purpose and your mission and what it is that you're doing in your business. Does it also
Mhm.
extend into your life?
Absolutely. I'm just a believer that, especially if you run any kind of small to mid-sized business where it's very connected to you,
Yeah.
that we need to start with the personal vision. And in fact, that personal vision should drive the business vision. Right.
Mhm.
And sometimes we get that the other way around.
Yeah.
And so, I just really truly believe that our goal needs to be to intentionally build a business that supports the life that we want to live, and then have a life that fuels our capacity to intentionally build a business. It's quite
Right.
circular at that point. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think, and often how this is manifested, certainly in our industry, is that having a personal vision of the kind of work you want to do and the kind of clients that you want to serve had a very direct business application, because it usually defined, are you working with a particular target audience? Are you specializing in certain type of work? And so, I think if we can connect the dots between those two things, we're in good shape.
Yeah, you're taking me back again to some early coaching that I did with advisors. And, first call, I would say, so what got you into the business?
Right.
And pretty open general comment. And there were lots and lots of answers, but there were two kinds of answers. And one was because I love the markets, because I love doing things for clients, because I love blah, 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 blah. Didn't matter on that side what the answer was. But the answer, the second bucket of answer was because you can make a lot of money. And I would say 80% of the people who said, because I can make a lot of money,
Wow.
never made it past 6 months of production.
Yeah.
This was a group of advisors I was working with. It was Merrill Lynch in the States. It was big, help people in their first 8 months of production.
Yeah.
And these are the ones who dropped off because they were kicked out because they weren't making a lot of money. They didn't have anything to connect to.
Yeah. And I think we get, as we started to look at this group of individuals, and in perfect honesty, the reason that we did the research and the reason I wrote a book was some weird form of personal therapy, because I was also in that point, right? I was trying to figure out what the next phase looked like, but we started to see this kind of interesting pattern where people would be like new in the business out of the gate, and their personal goals and their business goals were really tightly aligned, because maybe it was just making some money, but everything was new, and so there was growth and it all worked. And then they got to the point where they were successful, and all of a sudden the sort of personal fulfillment started to lag, because now it was building an infrastructure and having to run a business, and it wasn't always what they got into business to do. But we kept seeing this point, we called it the fulfillment flatline, where they were successful and they were had built a nice business, but their personal vision, it wasn't aligned because it had changed. Like what was important to them had changed, or they just drifted from this idea of what mattered. And that to me was the point where, it was a tale of two paths, right? You either just didn't acknowledge it and didn't feel great, or you actually skyrocketed because you redefined that personal vision and kept it going.
Yeah. And, this is the work you do. It's the work I do. When you start out, you're thinking like an individual, you're thinking like a sole contributor, you're thinking like a person who's growing and developing something. And then you get to that stage, any kind of business, but where you have to build that infrastructure, you have to build that team. If you're not thinking like the CEO, if you're still thinking like a sole proprietor, and you're not creating a vision for, what is truly a business that you are the CEO of, you have to decide if that's the kind of business that you want, and why do you want that, and what is that purpose all about? But then also, are you setting yourself up for success at that next stage of growth? Because if you're still thinking like a sole proprietor, it's just going to cause you frustration, and you're
absolutely
ready to leave the business that you're in.
You might need different skills around you, right?
Yeah,
very
exactly,
different.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that stand in the way, and this is obviously a big part of the research that you do. And you and I, in the summertime when we were planning this, talked about two things: habits and assumptions. And so what are some of, you wrote a great blog yesterday. It was like so perfect. We just talked about this before the session started. I love the behavioral sciences. I love the biases that, trap us.
Yeah.
And obviously I like the strategies that untrap us a lot more. But let's talk about some of the things that really keep people from doing what could move their business forward.
Look, we all have so many of these things, I suppose. One, and maybe just to step back for a moment to give some context. When we think about client experience, which is a big part of the work that we do, we tend to think of it in terms of a framework as this pyramid, and it's a simple model, but it's born of all of the investor research that we do. And really, it just shows the path from going from satisfaction to engagement with your
Mhm.
experience. So at the base is good service, table stakes, the kinds of things we all need to do. In the middle is getting the offer right, often a more targeted offer, more specialized. And then the top is just what we call leadership, which is more about the relationships and supporting clients in broader ways, often which have nothing to do with your core product or service. So we've seen this path. And so when you ask about habits and assumptions, the reason I mention that is I think one of our biggest habits is probably just to focus on the foundation because it's
Mhm.
easy. And so our reaction is always, well, I need to improve service, right? I need to be more responsive. I need to make sure I've got a process to fix problems. I mean, we need all of that. That literally is the foundation, but it doesn't drive deeper engagement. It just
Mhm.
gets you dissatisfied at that point. And during the pandemic, it's become increasingly likely to happen because we had no choice but to focus on our foundation, right? We had to figure out Zoom. It was all about, digital signatures. It's all very granular stuff and
Mhm.
it's hard stuff. But the reality is that's not what creates engagement, right?
Right.
It's like, I hate to say it because it's been so difficult, but really it's still table stakes. It's just a new table stakes.
Yeah.
And so, I think that is just this habit of going back to what we know about what it means to deliver good service.
Mhm.
But that doesn't get us to the next stage. And unfortunately, getting into the next stage often involves some of the assumptions that
Right.
we often make.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about those. So you've highlighted three in the blog that you put out yesterday:
Hmm.
confirmation bias,
Yep.
hindsight bias, which kind of go hand in hand, and
Yeah.
anchoring bias.
Yeah.
So, I find so confirmation bias is great. We look for the things that confirm our hypothesis.
Yeah.
I've always found it fascinating that we so often look for things more consciously when we're looking to avoid, when we're
Hmm.
looking to, we don't need to do that.
Yeah.
That's not going to work,
Yeah.
and look, here's the evidence. But,
Yes.
but break down confirmation bias in, now I know you were talking about uh, virtual reviews.
Yeah.
Uh, you and I both said this. I'm not sick of Zoom. You're not
No,
sick of
no,
Zoom.
I'm all right.
Everybody always says everybody's sick of Zoom. It's like, I don't know
Just
who
not
those
us,
people are.
apparently.
Just not us. Tell us how confirmation bias shows up in the research.
Well, it shows up, I think, as much as anything in the way we deliver our client experience. And the research is showing us, to your point, that there may be a contrary view. And so as I'm talking to a lot of professionals right now, I often hear things like, well, I, I've, my clients want this, or my clients want that. And the reality is, when we scratch the surface, it's because they talked to one or two clients who said that, and then we grab onto that. It's like, my
Right.
clients. Well, it's two clients. Let's be clear, because that's what we want.
Mhm.
And I have quite literally talked to people who said, we're going back to in person because that's how we do things. Once or twice, I've even heard, irrespective of what clients think, which makes me cringe just a little. But I do think we start to pick up on those disparate voices and say, okay, no, this is what my clients want, and it just happens to be what I want. Isn't that
Isn't that
wonderful?
interesting?
Isn't that interesting how that happened? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's literally confirmation bias is everywhere that we look, and it's a
Especially
hard
now.
one to break.
Yeah.
Right? It's a hard one to say, I love this idea. I think this is what everybody wants. I don't necessarily want to hear that they want something different because this is my business. So I'm going to do it my way.
Absolutely. And there's always some likelihood that you say, well, but my clients are different, which is why, I love the work that we do, because we do industry research, but we really go into a business and say, this is what your clients are telling us. Okay, let's look
Mhm.
at this. Nobody's making this up. And it's not always that it's 100% one way or the other. So for example, about half of the clients we talked to said they want to go back in person. So you could argue it's 50-50 here, and that is very different from the way it was just a few years ago. So
Mhm.
then the question just becomes, okay, so what about the other half? What
Right.
about the other half who not only are okay with virtual, but in some cases think it's better? So let's get real about the fact that as soon as you say we're going back, you've now alienated a group of your clients. And how are we going to tackle that?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. My advisors just moved across the country.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter,
No, no,
right?
we're seeing a lot of that, right? And there are some businesses who were always virtual.
Yeah.
Often a lot of next gen advisors that we talk to who just started this way, and they haven't noticed
Yeah.
what's gone on with all of this.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. So, and I think a little bit of what you just talked about is false consensus bias as
yeah,
well,
yeah,
right? That it's
yes,
just, we're we're looking at the wrong information.
yes,
We need to look at
yeah,
all of the data
hmm
to make informed decisions. And it is still a personalized business. You're not going to treat all of your clients exactly the same way.
yeah.
Never has been true.
It's right, and just being open to asking the question, right?
Mhm.
Which to me is, I've always believed that it's a hallmark of a great leader anyway. I mean, first of all, being curious enough to ask the questions,
Mhm.
and then to actively listen and question how this needs to look going forward. Otherwise, we just run the risk of looking like dinosaurs at some point.
Yeah.
The good thing about COVID is that it's forced us out of that a little bit because we had no choice, but it shouldn't have taken a pandemic.
No, no. But, the risk of looking like dinosaurs is only one point. What's the big risk? I mean, maybe it's obvious, but what's the big risk? What do you tell advisors if they're not uh, taking the first of all, getting the feedback and then acting on the feedback?
Well, there's a few, right? I mean, they will become less relevant over time, and they won't be differentiated in terms of what they're delivering. So we're big believers, perhaps not surprisingly, in the idea that value needs to be co-created, that
Mhm.
we need to gather input and use that to inform the experience and actively involve our clients as partners in order, and that builds a wall around our clients. It creates a level of value that cannot truly be replicated by anyone else because of that level of active involvement. And so I think that's just ultimately the risk, is we're going to wake up one day and look around us and think, what just happened? We were so good back in the day, and we just stuck to it. It's not easy. Look, I mean, I'm old. I have to get pushed a lot, but
But, age becomes a factor if you want. It's not just, you talk a lot about a referable business,
yeah,
but a saleable business
yes.
must come into play as well.
Oh,
Because if
100%.
you, so that's interesting. So it wasn't a planned sort of thing I wanted to talk about. It's just
Mm.
come up. So is there a difference between, and like, what does your research say about becoming a saleable business by doing this?
Well, I mean, our research is largely with the investors, so there's some limits
Right.
to what we
Okay.
can
Yeah.
do. But I think that without a doubt, if we look at any industry and what creates any kind of enterprise value, all of these things, anything from satisfied clients to having a diverse client base across age groups, at least, so that they're not all leaving,
Right.
having a team-based approach. I think all of these tend to add more value for clients, but also lead to greater enterprise value as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think of mergers and acquisitions, and I have
Yeah.
a girlfriend I walk with in the morning
Yeah.
who does a lot of M&A stuff,
Hmm.
not in this industry at all.
Yeah.
But she says, "Oh, we're doing the due diligence right now," aka going through all the paperwork.
Yeah.
Right. And so imagine having a business, two businesses. One has bona fide research that says,
Yeah.
this is what we asked our clients, this is what they say they want, this is what
Hmm.
they say they need, and we deliver on that.
Yeah.
Versus business number two that says, yeah, my clients love me,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
provide great service. It's like, where's the evidence?
Yeah.
Like, where's the evidence?
It's also incredibly helpful at demonstrating untapped opportunity, which is the other piece of
Right.
valuation, as we know, is what's the potential here. When we work with professionals to gather input, we're looking at how they're doing. We're looking at what clients need, but we're also trying to tease out the untapped opportunities. Like,
Mhm.
is there cross-selling opportunity? Are there opportunities to go deeper? Are there opportunities to connect with the next generation, to generate more referrals? And that paints a picture often of a lot of untapped potential in
Right.
most businesses.
Right. Right. So plain and simple,
Mm.
what do our listeners need to do?
I'll give you two answers real quick though, because I think it depends on what what problem. We started talking about absolute engagement, right? And I'm
Mhm.
still very passionate about that piece of it. And to me, that's, pouring yourself that cup of coffee and really doing some introspection on where you're at, what you want to be doing, the kind of work you want to do, and then asking yourself the cold, hard questions about whether your business actually aligns with that.
Mm.
On the client experience side, we've been talking a lot about input, and look, we're completely biased because it's where we live and breathe every day. But I would start by just asking clients in a formal way what they need, want, and expect, where they're challenged, concerned, and what their aspirations are, and then again hold that up against your current client experience and ask if there's anything that needs to change going forward.
Hmm. I love it. I love it. And it takes some courage to do that because you
Yeah.
might not like the answers, but
Yeah.
you're going to grow.
Absolutely. There's a lot of fear, unfounded fear, I might add, around things like asking clients if they're satisfied, which always makes me chuckle because I was like, I'm doing the research. I don't see a lot of dissatisfaction. That is almost never the outcome. It's more the opportunities
Yeah.
that are the outcome of this kind of process.
Yeah.
But we're human.
Yeah. Yeah. We want to be loved. And yet,
Exactly.
somebody leaving the business is a definite sign that we're not being
Yeah,
loved.
that's like, yeah, we don't want that one.
Right. Okay, we're at our 1 minute, so I'm going to pop forward the final slide. Our voices will stay, but our contact information and beautiful photos will pop up. So this is how
Did you have somebody else's photo of me then? Good.
this is
Nice.
how people can get in touch with us, and just say thank you, Julie.
Thank
It's
you.
always great to catch up with you and have a conversation. We're both, have great passion about, how to drive businesses to success, but how to have business people feel successful and
Yeah.
satisfied and joyful. And you do that day in and day out. So, Julie, thank you so much for being my guest. The replay will be available shortly on LinkedIn. And for those of you joining next time, Tim Reister from Corporate Visions, who is a fascinating presenter on the brain science, the behavioral science, and the cognitive psychology around selling. So you absolutely want to tune into that one on October 6th. And obviously, I'll be putting out announcements about that. In the meantime, Julie, have an amazing day.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care.